This is François Vigneault from Montreal, and I'm here with Reinhard Kleist, who is joining us all the way from Berlin for a live drawing session with some drawings that are going to be based on his work on his biography of the musician Nick Cave. And we're going to have, I believe, 3 different songs in 3 different sessions, and I'll start off with just a few questions. But just to introduce Reinhard, for those of you who are not familiar with his work, he is a German comic book artist and designer, originally from Cologne, but has lived in Berlin for many years, maybe more than 20, I think. And is the author of a wide variety of books, including several biographies, including biographies of Elvis Presley, Johnny Cash, a biography of the Jewish boxer Harry Haft called Der Boxer, and then other works as well, such as Berlin Noir. And he's the winner of, I think, 2 times the Maxim Moritz Prize, which is one of the highest honors in the German comics world. And so I'd like to welcome him to, not all the way to Montreal, but to our stream. Welcome, Reinhard.
Hello. It's nice to be here, although it's not Montreal, but my living room.
And is I see a lot of drawings and things behind you. Is this where you work? Do you work from home, or do you have a studio?
No, I have a studio where I do most all the artwork, and then at home I do all the computer work, like scanning and redoing the pages and doing the typography and all those things. But my studio is just for drawing. Okay, I'm a very traditional worker.
And actually, that I was wondering, as I was looking over your art, I had some guesses, but I was wondering, and we'll see when you're drawing today. But I was wondering, what are the sort of tools of your trade? Like, what kind of things do you draw with, and how do you do your creative process?
Yeah, as I said, I work very traditionally, so everything's done on paper, and I use for the inking, I just use brushes and ink. Maybe I have one of those brushes here. That's one of these. It's a very, very small broken brush because I really like broken brushes. And for the sketching, I usually, when you see that later when I do the live drawing thing, I use the brush pen, the brush pen. I think a lot of artists are very familiar with.
And that's interesting. You're sketching in ink, and then you're working in ink to do your finals as well. You're not using pencils or digital work at that stage of your work at all.
Yeah, I mean, the pencil sketches are done before.
Okay.
And then I work over the pencil sketches with ink, and then I erase the whole thing. And all the computer work is just done for retouching things, cleaning things, or change something in the layout. The process of the Nick Cave book was extremely difficult because I did a lot of changes while I already had the final pages, and so a lot of changes on the layout were done on the computer.
Okay, so you would kind of do cut and paste of the drawings that you had already created and like kind of move them around, or?
Yeah, or like change something of the composition because, like I said, the work was extremely difficult and it was also quite chaotic. So I drove my editor mad, and all the corrections that he wanted to have, I had to do them later on the computer.
And I think I read that the process for that book was about 3 years long. Is that right?
Yeah, it was 3 years long, and actually, what came out with 2 books because during the process of writing, I was also doing a lot of sketches where I was trying to get familiar with the characters, with the looks of Nick Cave and his band and all the other people. So I was doing a lot of sketches and illustrations, and so those were later on combined in kind of like an art book where you could see the formation of the graphic novel, but also a lot of illustrations, because I did a lot of the work was based on the lyrics of Nick Cave, and I did illustrations of lyrics that that he was writing. And a lot of his lyrics, they are like stories. So he's a brilliant storyteller in his songs. So I wanted to do illustrations and short stories out of these lyrics. And in that art book, we have 3 illustrated songs, and also in the graphic novel, we have a lot of illustrated songs, and they always tell a little part of the story, or they do something like an interpretation of what was going on in Nick Cave's life.
Yes, exactly. And for anyone who hasn't had a chance to see the book, it's not just a straight biography. You know, you have woven in sort of fictional or metafictional literary elements that are in Nick Cave's music and life, and kind of mix the two of them together. There's not, and sometimes there's not really a clear boundary between what is real and what is fantasy, what is a creation of Nick Cave and what is your own interpretation of his creation, and then what is theoretically the biography behind everything.
Yes, that was a little bit based on talks I had with Nick Cave. When I started the project, I had contact with Nick Cave, and he was very much willing to give some input in it. And right in the beginning, he told me that he wanted to have something more mythological, free, and not so much biographical work based on so-called facts. And in the process, my first scripts, they were really, really boring because they had just the biography and a different framework. And I was translating my scripts into English, and I sent it to him, and he didn't like them.
Okay.
He didn't really say it, but you could feel that he was not really into them. So in the end, I made a completely different setup. And my idea was to bring some of his characters to life, and all these characters, they tell some part of his life. And then in the end, I confront them with Nick Cave himself. So he's like the maker of them. So they confront him with their ill fate. And from that point on, I could do in the book not only tell the biography, but also make something like a meditation on the theme of what is an artist and what is art like, what is art doing. And when the characters of songs of a novel or a movie, when they come to life, then the artist is not only the artist, he's also the creator of something godlike in this universe that the artist forms. And so I found that very, very interesting. And that's also something that he was referring a lot to.
Yes, there's definitely a sense of something larger than life. The creator's the creator, as you said, like as a god, like as a mythological creature that's bigger than his creations, bigger than his own life in some ways. I have a question from one of the viewers, from Martin, who asks, how or why did you choose Nick Cave as a subject?
Because I was always a fan of his music, and I did also a book about Johnny Cash because I was also a big fan. And Johnny Cash is also a really, really great storyteller. And I found that interesting to transform something like music into a medium that doesn't have sound. So I want to take what I can from the music and transform it into a comic. And Nick Cave is a brilliant storyteller, like I said. Plus, I had the opportunity to have contact with him. So that was at the very starting point of the whole project. I don't think I would have done the project if I wouldn't have the chance to cooperate with him.
Right, because his presence is it's here, right? As opposed to, you've done biographies of Johnny Cash and Elvis Presley, and they're both departed. And I assume that Johnny was departed when you started your project about him.
Yes, exactly.
So but there's something a little bit different with someone who is like very much a living presence. For instance, I've seen that you sometimes do tour posters and things like that with for Nick Cave. So you're still like in a collaboration with him, and you're both living artists working together right now.
Well, I wouldn't call it like working together, but I know that he really liked the book. He also wrote something very funny for the cover of the book, and I'm really, really much into the working together with musicians. And I did a lot of live drawing shows with musicians after the book came out, because I did extensive touring around. And I had wonderful musicians interpreting Nick Cave's music, and I was drawing to that during the concerts and drawing to the music. And there was one of the greatest experiences I ever had with my art. And so that's why I'm still very, very interested to work in the field of music biography, or to do something with music, because it's widening my spectrum of work as a comic artist.
And right, as a performer as well.
Yes, I feel like a rock star sometimes.
Well, because due to the current situation, we don't have a live band for you. I'm in my apartment, you're in your apartment. But would you like to do the first of the drawings to a song that you're going to do?
Yes. Okay. I will have to rearrange a little bit, and then we can start. And I guess the first song is "The Mercy Seat," right?
Perfect.
Okay. Cool. So you tell me when the song starts. Do you hear anything?
Perfect. I don't hear it yet, but as soon as I do.
Okay, there it is. Okay.
There we go.
So, switching the camera. Here again.
Now, go ahead, please.
Yeah, that was my interpretation of the Mercy sequence in the song, where this convict is on his way to the electric chair and reflects about his life. Very dark song, but Johnny Cash also made a very, very cool version of that song. So that's where circles come together.
Right, during the sessions with Rick Rubin, I think.
Yeah,
those are great. Now you did something there, which you do very frequently in the book, which is you're mixing the character, which is the convict who's on his way to being electrocuted, with the kind of larger than life figure of Nick Cave, right? Can you talk a little bit about maybe on just a basic level, like how you draw, like what is your technique for drawing faces so that they're recognizable, but they're also not like overly close? You know, that's something I notice very often in the book, is that many of the characters are very recognizable throughout. Of course, Nick Cave is very recognizable, and yet there's something very loose and free about the drawing style. It's not overly worked over. I hope you understand that I mean that as a compliment.
Thanks. Actually, a lot of it is in the beginning. It's based on photographs, and I try to when I copy the photographs, and I try to look where are the main features of the face. So, it took me some time to recognize. Okay, there are some features that are in Nick Cave's face that are always recognizable, even though he changes his hair or something. That's a very large forehead, very bushy eyebrows, and his nose that goes like this. And this distance here, I don't know how to call it in English, is quite long. And then he has, it is called what?
This little divot here is called the philtrum, if I remember correctly.
Oh, really?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah. And the chin that goes a little bit backwards. So if you be aware of that, then basically you have him, and then you can draw him from several angles, and also do some different expressions on the face and everything. And then there's also his very special body language that he has, and that I try to examine through watching a lot of videos. Try to examine how he moves and what is the basic patterns of his movement, and always come back especially when he's on stage.
And I think that that's something very interesting reading through the book, is that there is so much movement. There's movement, sound, there's energy, and it's quite a spectrum too, from, you know, like the more punk sound of the birthday party to then this more like folk country influenced singers like work that is being done with Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. And I'm wondering, what is your way of tackling like movement, energy, sound in your work? I'm not sure if you know, but that's one of the themes of the festival this year, is the intersection of comics with other arts. And here clearly like music is very important. And I'm wondering if you can shed light on how you sort of tackle that.
Basically because I listen to the music a lot, and when I do interpretations of the songs, then I'm listening to the music a lot, and I try to analyze the lyrics. Like there's one song that was very, very important for the book. That's the Higgs Boson Blues, and I was reading the lyrics over and over, and I couldn't really understand what he's actually singing about. But I knew I need this song. This is my the core of the whole book, and so there's a large section in the end where I'm referring to the idea of this song, and then there's another version that I made, interpretation of I have a hole in my head. It's on the Murder Ballads, Staggerly. It's in the art book, and in this story I did a lot of trying to get the rhythm of the song, because it's a very rhythmical song, and all the scenes where the people are talking to each other, I put the lyrics of the song in it and transformed them into the dialogue, and so I try to put a lot of rhythm in the order of the pictures, like listening to the sound of the song, and when like gunshot comes or the screaming comes, then I refer to that in the pictures.
Yeah, both with the drawing and also with the rhythm and the panels, like the way that you place the words and everything. All of those things you're trying to connect them back to the music in some way.
Yeah. And if people are aware of or listening to the songs while they read the book, then they can see some elements in it. Like in Red Right Hand, I put the sound of the bell in the exact moment. In the comic, in the exact moment when it's also in the song,
right?
So, so this is my way of bringing a medium that doesn't have a sound, bringing it to transporting sound to the reader.
Yeah, exactly. And what? So you're listening to a lot of music, and you also you communicated with Nick a little bit. What other research went into your process? You said you were working from photographs. Like how it's with 3 years of work and lots of edits and everything. I'm sure it's a lot. But can you bring us a little bit into some of your research or some of your creative / research process?
Yeah, there were a lot of things. Especially in the chapter where I'm talking about his time in Berlin. I mean, I'm living in Berlin, and so I had a lot of people talking about how they experienced that time or how they met Nick Cave in that time. And it's a very, very fascinating time. And I didn't have too much space in the book to really, really go into the details. So I had those sources, and I had I think 2 biographies, one of Ian Johnston and the other one by Max Dux. And also I had a lot of books referring to the time of Nick Cave. What is very interesting is that there are not very many books about Nick Cave on the market. There is not like the big final biography of Nick Cave. And unfortunately, the book of Max Dux is out of print, I guess, because it's really, really good. And I highly recommend reading it if you find it somewhere. And so all these things came into the book. But actually, at some point of writing the script, I came to the point where I said, okay, I have to get rid of all these books, just throw them away, throw them in a corner, and do my own interpretation and actually come closer to what my feeling of the music and the artist is. And so I guess there are a lot of, like, how did Nick Cave call it, half-truths in the book, but I think it's actually closer to what interpretation of an artist and his work can be.
Right. It's sort of like letting go a little bit of the absolute control that you might want to have over every fact is perfect. Everything happens in the right chronological order. But when you
that's actually boring. I mean, we're talking about rock and roll. It doesn't matter what really happened. It's more like the legend. It's more the mythology around rock and roll. And that's actually more important and I think more interesting than just putting some facts here and there. If you want to have that, you can read a biography, but this is more like an interpretation of the life and the artist.
It absolutely comes across on the page, and that was definitely an impression I got, especially like in sort of the early chapters too, where Nick is sort of like contemplating his own place in the music universe and the creation that he wants to create out of his music and his life and things like that. And you really do get the sense that you have to sort of fudge some of the facts in order to get to that deeper truth. And I think that definitely comes across in the work. Now, you mentioned, and I was going to ask, I thought that the chapter that was set in Berlin during his years in Berlin was really interesting because well, first off, I knew you were from Berlin, but it felt like there was something something interesting and foundational about like that, going to another place and finding more of your voice in another land, you know. And of course, Nick Cave's from Australia, goes to London, then goes to Berlin, and then you're also not from Berlin originally. You're from Cologne.
Yeah, New Cologne. Yeah.
And so, was there anything in that story that connected with your own experiences of coming to like the big city, going to a new different place? Because I know you've also done books that are specifically about Berlin, and so I was just curious of like how you saw those things sort of intersecting in your work.
Well, I mean, Berlin is well, it changed a lot in the last years, but it's still a vibrant, interesting city. And when I came here, I had also like a experience of, this is the big thing. This is like the city where you can be creative, you can party a lot, and where you can do crazy things, and you have a lot of freedom, and also you don't need much money to live here. It's changing, like I said. And it must have been much more intense when the Cave came here. That was in the 80s. And Berlin was like this crazy city surrounded by the war. And I think he was gathering a lot of energy from this situation, because it was like the island of crazy people in Berlin. He was surrounded by the communist, and it has this wall, and all the crazy people, they went to Berlin. So you had a huge, interesting and creative atmosphere here. And he swallowed all that. He was sucking on all these creative energy everywhere, because there were a lot of new music based here at that time, and he wanted to be part of that. And I was very emotionally touched when I was reading about his experiences here. And I kind of had a similar experience. I turned my work as a comic book artist completely around, because I also wanted to do something about the energy of Berlin. And I mean, still, I do a lot of biographies about people also that are based in other cities, but I'm always coming back to Berlin, because it's the city for storytelling.
Right. It's you have one of your characters call it something like an island paradise There
was Blixer Bargeld saying that, and then he said he doesn't want the wall to come down, because he doesn't want all the normal people coming here. And that's what happened.
And alas, yes, it did happen. Well, would you like to go into the next song?
Okay, yeah. I guess we have Henry Lee.
I think that's what I have also. Yes. Okay. Very nice.
So, you're on again? Yeah, I really love this song. It's also a very great story that he's telling here about this lady killing her lover. And I have a band in Berlin. We're like a project of friends, and we do a lot of shows together. And they also perform this song, and we have a very, very beautiful duet between a drag queen and a singer. And that's always a very emotional highlight of the concert. This song.
Very nice. Well, I was curious about that. I was wondering, with all your connections with doing these biographies and with doing so many performances yourself, I was wondering what your background in music was, and whether or not you have a background in it, whether you play music now.
Actually, no. I was learning classical guitar, but it was not my thing. So okay. I'm not really a good musician or a person that's has a feeling for music. It's just not my thing. But as I said, I really love working with musicians and doing something where I combine these two forms of art. And that was what I was always interested in. I was always interested in music. All my life I went to concerts, and I also love the combination of music and other art forms in the presentation of music in concerts, and also the storytelling behind it. Not only in the lyrics, but also in the whole setup of artists that are creating a certain persona, which might be completely different than the person they are. They transform themselves on the stage into something different, and that's what I was always admiring, because I'm not really that kind of person. I'm also a horrible actor. And I always admire people that can change into something completely different.
Whereas, well, because you're a comic book artist, you're doing your transformations on the page, right? You do your acting through the expressions and the movement of the characters on the page. So even though you're drawing somebody else, they're sort of your alter egos in some way. There's a little bit of you in everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even if I draw something about Fidel Castro, which is a character very far away from myself, I always find something of myself in the story.
That's perfect. That's very true. I have another question from Martin, and he wanted, and I'm curious about this too. He says, "What can you tell us about Germany's comic book scene? And is it on par with other kinds of literature in the country?" And it's true, I don't feel like I know very much about the German comic scene, and I would love if you could talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, which is a shame, because Germany has a very, very cool comic scene at the moment, which is very different from when I started working in comic books 25 years ago. Is it that long, or even longer? I don't know. There was a very, very little comic scene, and that all changed with the movement of the graphic novel, which became very successful in Germany. And we have a lot of really, really interesting artists that are also translated into different countries, like Uli Lust, for example, or Barbara Jelin. And that's something that I'm very happy about, because like I said, when I started in comic books, it was the readership was very, very small. The only artists that were successful, they were mostly funnies, like Ralph König, or and now we have a very, very big variety of artists, and they also have an audience. Comics are not longer just in the comic book stores or in somewhere in the crappy corner in the back of a bookstore. No, they're on the front, and they are presented, and they're on the media. When comic book comes out, the media is reporting about it. It's a newspaper, TV, or thing. And that doesn't mean that we all getting rich, but at least there's a market in Germany, and it's I have the feeling that it's getting bigger, and I also have the feeling that more and more institutions are getting aware of what you can do with comic books. So a lot of comic books are read in the schools. I also did a lot of performances in schools talking about books like The Boxer, which is actually about the Holocaust, or then I did the book called An Olympic Dream, which is about the crisis of migration. And also we have institutions like the Goethe Institute that were very much on the forefront of promoting German comics worldwide. And they do a lot of concerts and workshops, presentations with my work. And I'm very, very happy that an institution like the Goethe Institute is working more and more with comics, and they're sending comic artists around the world to promote the German comic book scene.
And I know we have a branch of the Goethe Institute here in Montreal. So for all those who are interested in German cultural things here in this city, they can find that there.
Yeah, they always have a very, very cool library everywhere in the world. The Goethe Institute have a very cool library with a huge section of German graphic novels.
Perfect. So that's a good place
check it out.
Yeah, that's a good place for any Montreal people to check it out. I had a question from Virginie, and she asked a question that I already asked, which was whether you draw on paper or on a computer. We talked about that a little bit, but I thought maybe I could kind of segue that into just a slight talk about, because I know you do graphic design as well, and I just was wondering how you balance the different parts of your career.
Well, in the last years, I've focused mainly on illustration and comic books. I don't do graphic design anymore, or illustrations for advertisement or something like that, which I did before.
You've escaped.
Concentrate.
I just said you've escaped.
Yes, I escaped. Yeah, I don't need that anymore because the books are selling quite good, and so I'm free to do the work that I really want. I do a lot of illustrations for novels also. Like I just finished working on Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, which is a very cool book. So I did illustrations for that. So that's what I'm doing, or some work on for a TV station, which is very interesting to work on.
Was that the work with Arte?
Yes. There was a work with Arte, and the most recent one was with a German news channel called Felix, and it was about the theme of the Holocaust, which was not a very happy theme, but very interesting to see what they did with the drawings and how they use the drawings to transport something that you actually cannot show. And I think it's a very, very interesting way of showing the audience something that you actually cannot really show. So they used comic-like illustrations that I did together with a colleague to show something that leaves the spectators some space, something for their own interpretation, because all these things that we were showing there, they were not able to show them with photographs or live footage.
Right. It can, it's exactly, because when you're doing comics and illustration, you're sort of like in that liminal space between reality and the written word, and sometimes you can push things in different directions. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, also you can, like, metaphorically speaking, you can put the camera on blur, so you're not showing what is actually happening, but the what's happening in the spectator's eye or mind is filling in, and is, I think, more impressive than if you actually would show it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what I think they sometimes say, that comics is a very collaborative art, because the artist is presenting something, but the reader also brings their own interpretation to the work as well.
Yes, absolutely. That's something that you can use in comic books, and that makes also the medium very, very interesting and challenging for the reader as well. More than watching a movie where you see everything and you're just consuming.
Yes.
When you read a book, you have to do a lot of work yourself, and also when you do read a comic book, you also have to do some work by yourself as a reader.
You control the pace and all sorts of different things there too. I have a note here that I think their name is, I might pronounce it, Aim Pei from the Goethe Institute Librarian. They say hi. So,
hey.
Always nice to hear. Oh, you're really in Berlin. That's a genuine Berlin siren. They don't sound like that here.
Oh, you hear the siren? Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Well, would you like to do your final drawing for the session, and then we'll come back for a few more questions at the very end?
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect.
That's my lamp, actually.
Oh, lovely.
No, I lost my pen. Oh, here it is. Okay. Yep, I'm ready.
Very nice and appropriately fluid illustration for the weeping song.
Yeah, there's a lot of weeping in the picture as well.
Actually, I was wondering, maybe can you just hold up the drawings to the camera one last time for the people who maybe didn't catch the whole thing, or are they going to drip?
The last one, it's actually,
it'll drip everywhere, yeah.
It will drip, yeah. Maybe we do that in a few minutes.
That's no problem.
No, we don't have very much time.
Yeah, I'm sure that they can post them. They'll post them on the event at the end. You can send them a photo and they'll post it.
Yeah, I can do a photo and send it, and so we can see it on the website.
That's awesome. So now you've done a wide variety of work in all kinds of different genres, lots of biographies, and you've done this sort of. I don't know. I mean, I guess it could be interpreted almost as a trilogy of these sort of like rock icons with Elvis, Johnny, and Nick Cave. Now, can you just standard question? Can you tell us about what you're going to be doing next?
Yes, but it's already announced that I decided to make a book about another musician after I finished Nick Cave. I went through a lot of trouble doing the Nick Cave book, but I had so much fun in the end doing it. So I really, really want to do another musician. And then, in between the two projects, I did another book about a boxer, which is something like a project of my heart. It's called Knockout, and it's not published in English yet, but it's soon to come. And it's about a boxer as well. And then, I do a graphic novel about David Bowie. Then.
Oh, okay.
So that was pretty obvious, I know, but it was too tempting. Just recently in Germany, there came another biography about David Bowie on the market by Michael Allred that I haven't read yet, but I heard it's very good. But then there will be two about David Bowie. I mean, he's so big. I mean, you can do a whole library of comic books about David Bowie, and you still have not catched every glimpse of the
right with the subject. Yeah, with a subject that's such a shapeshifter and a chameleon as that, and especially with two artists with styles as different as you and Mike Allred, I think it can encompass the multitudes that are there for sure. I can imagine both of them. That's perfect.
Yeah. Bowie is like such an icon that there are so many facets that you can put your spot on from different angles.
Perfect. Well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you so much for traveling through space and time to be with us all the way over here on the other side of the Atlantic. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Your book, your most recent book, I believe, Nick Cave, Mercy on Me, and as well as the Nick Cave and Bad Seeds art book are both available. And I know Mercy on Me is available in English, in German, in French, and in other languages. So all of our viewers can enjoy it. So thank you so much for joining us, Reinhard.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.